Hi, and welcome to Writing for the World Wide Web. This is for Winter 2 in 2025 online. My name is Steve Krause. I'm glad that you're here. I have a cold, which is why I sound like this. I don't usually sound quite this bad. And I'm going to record a kind of a short video here, just giving you sort of an overview of the class and give you a tour of the Canvas site. There's still plenty for you to read and ask questions about, and we'll carry on those discussions online here in a second. So let me first go ahead and share the Canvas site with you. Okay, this is just on Canvas, of course. This is what you see. I have the student view up on my computer right now. And I'm going to click on where it says syllabus and just hit a couple highlights here. Like I said, my name is Steve Krause. I'm a professor in the English department. I've been teaching classes like this here since 1998. And I actually started teaching a class about writing for the web back in the early 90s, believe it or not, when the web was just getting started. Needless to say, the class has changed a lot since then, but there's still some things that are similar. So we're going to learn about some of the technical aspects of how the web works, but mostly we're going to focus on the kind of writing that people do professionally in web things. And that includes nowadays not only just web pages that people create to promote some sort of product or idea, but also things like social media and things like that. There are two books that you need to get for the course. The first book is this one. It's called Content. If we can get, well, see, it blurs out in my with my background there. It's called Content by Kate Eckhorn. It's a thin book, pretty cheap, things like this, and it is a critique of the way that content works online in some of the ways in which it's kind of problematic, and you'll read on in terms of some of the problems that Eckhorn has with the way that the web has gone and the way that content has become disconnected from context and meaning and things like that. Okay. Now, this book is the opposite. This is a book by Anne Handley called Everybody Writes, Your New and Improved Go-To Guide for Creating Ridiculously Good Content. Now, Eckhorn is an academic, known as an academic and very much a critic of the way that the internet has gone awry in different ways. She's a marketer. She's trying to explain to people how to create content, particularly in social media platforms that attracts readers and viewers, and potentially that translates as customers to sell goods and services. Okay, so we have a bit of a contradiction here, right? We have a book that's basically critiquing the internet the same way that one might critique capitalism, and then we also have a book that's basically about how to participate in capitalism. I think this contradiction is kind of inherent with all things on the web. There's things about it, and we all know this from social media and things like that. There's things about social media that are wonderful. There's things about social media that are horrible. And that's kind of the soup that we're going to be swimming in throughout the term. Get the most current versions of these books because the current versions do make a difference. I want to spend a little bit of time here at the very beginning highlighting this part here, social media coding, computers and technology. First thing is that a lot of the writing for the web, of course, takes place in social media platforms, and we're going to be studying that. And so that means that you're going to have to participate in social media whether you want to or not. In other words, what I'm saying is that if you're someone like me who's already dabbling in various social media platforms, this will not be an issue at all. If you're someone who's sworn off all forms of social media, you're going to have to sign up again with a dummy account, if for no other reason, so that you can read some of the social media posts, as for one of the assignments as we will talk about in a second. Because one of the major assignments is a social media analysis of a company or an influencer. So if you've given up on social media before this course, I'm going to have to drag you back in, at least temporarily. That's thing number one. Thing number two is this class does ask a level of computer technical competency and work that's a little bit more than just working with email and Gmail and Google Docs and websites and pasting and copying links and stuff like that. We're going to do some basic coding, very basic coding, and we're going to work with some software like WordPress. So what that means is that you have to know for yourself where you're at with your competencies with technology. If you do a whole bunch of stuff with social media, and if you do a whole bunch of stuff with WordPress or blogging or other platforms like this, or if you've taken some computer class and if you've done some coding and things like that, this will be completely super duper easy. If you haven't done any of those things, you can still succeed in this class. Don't get me wrong. I mean, no experience is necessary, but I just want to point out that it might be a bit of a learning curve to deal with some of those things. Let me talk about a little bit about the online format of the class and the participation in the class a little bit. Now, I'm someone who's been teaching online now for a long time. I taught online starting in about mid 2000s, long before COVID. And my philosophy of teaching online has always been asynchronous learning, meaning we're never going to have a Zoom session where we all have to log in at the same time. Rather, the entire class takes place kind of outside of time, but within certain boundaries of time. And we'll talk about that when we get to the participation about discussions and things like that. Now, the thing that's great about asynchronous online classes like this is it gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of time and place. I mean, you don't have to be anywhere. I mean, we're right now, I'm in my sort of like vague house and which I've blurred out the background or whatever. But there's no reason why I couldn't take this class in Paris. I could easily be doing this in France right now. I could be on the beach. Actually, this time of year might not be such a bad idea to be on the beach. This is kind of inspiring. Um, or it gets kind of cold and wintry, so maybe I can go outside and be catching up on things in the class while watching the Northern Lights. I haven't seen any Northern Lights lately. All these other people posting pictures of the Northern Lights. I never managed to get a picture of it. Or you can be curled up in a library. You can do this in a whole bunch of different places. But, and this is the important but, with great power and flexibility comes great responsibility, which means you need to be to successfully participate in an online class like this that's asynchronous. It doesn't have any set meeting times. You need to be responsible enough to check in with the class. One thing about online classes sometimes is they can be a little bit like joining a gym or something, right? It seems like an easy idea. Oh, I can go whenever I want. I can do this all these exercises whenever I want. But then that turns into you never do it. Like you kind of forget. So part of what I'll be talking about this semester with the online classes is you need to find a way to sort of engage with the routine of the class in a way that fits your life. And also that fits the schedule for the discussions and things like that. So again, I just want to emphasize the idea of a lot of flexibility here, a lot of responsibility here as well. Okay. So, as part of that, I just want to highlight some of these things here. First off, you need to check your email every single day, because the only way I have to communicate directly with you, especially in an online class, is through email. I'm not going to be texting you. You're not going to be texting me. This is it. So, if something comes up and I need to email you, you need to be able to check in things like that. You have to have control of your technology, okay, for an online class to work. So what that means is that you have to be responsible for your internet access, meaning if you leave for to go out of town or something like that on some sort of vacation or something and you can't participate in the class, that's going to be a problem. And you also need to have control over your computer, okay? And I should point out, you do need a computer to successfully complete an online class. I've had students try to do this before with a phone or something like that. That does not work out, okay? As I say here, this is not a self-paced class. You need to participate in particular times during the week. And if you are gone too many times, then you may have an online attendance issue. Okay. So as I explained here, you've got to touch base in the class a minimum of twice a week between Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. If you're gone for a significant amount of that time, I will probably contact you and point this out, and you may end up failing because of a lack of attendance, because that is something that can happen. And honestly, that rarely happens. But the reason why I instituted this policy is because I've had students who have done things like just disappear from the online class for a month, and then they end up failing and they don't understand why. Well, here's why. Okay. All right, let me go back down here to in terms of stuff you need to do. The first part you need to do is participate. Most of the participation for the class will take place in the online discussions that are part of the Canvas setup and part of our ongoing class. And this is a discussion forum that we're having right here, for example. And you'll see that most of the class is set up with these discussions, okay? But here's some things that you need to do. First thing you need to do is do the reading. I'm not saying you have to read every single word of every single thing, but you need to be as up to date on the reading as possible in order to participate in the discussions and also to effectively complete the writing assignments. Those two books that I showed are crucial. Go buy the books. They're very cheap. Between the two of them, it'll be less than $50. Okay. And we will be leaning on those books quite a bit. I will also be assigning some other things that are available only electronically on the Canvas site and things like that. Now, the way the discussions work is they begin on Mondays and end on Wednesdays, and they begin on Wednesdays and end on Fridays. In order to get what you want to do is log into that discussion to write your initial post about a reading on either Monday or Wednesday, depending on the schedule. And you need to do that sometime on that first day. Then, on the following 2 days or so, you want to follow up with additional comments and posts responding to your peers. Okay. You need to do this. The key thing is not to think of in terms of a deadline of like, when do I have to finish posting? You want to think in terms of when do I start posting? The reason I do this is very simple. If I had said to people, discussions begin on Monday and end on Wednesdays, and so you have to post by Wednesday, what would happen is that everybody would post on Wednesday because that's the deadline. To me, that's kind of like if we had a face-to-face class that met for 75 minutes, and we spent the first 60 minutes of the class just sitting there, just kind of looking at each other. And then the last 15 minutes, everybody starts posting, oh, comments, things like that. So that's why it's crucial that you begin on Mondays or Wednesdays and then finish the days after that. Okay. I talk a little bit about some of the discussion posts here. You don't want to write huge, long discussions. 150 words or so is fine, but you do want to write several of these discussions and respond to several peers. You want to wait a little bit on your posts, and I have the whole thing here about how you want to post at least 6 hours apart. This is because what happens is that you'll post initially on Monday. You won't see anybody else's post until you post. You post initially on Monday, um, then you see other posts that show up. And if you just start responding to people right away, then never come back to the discussion, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? So you want to post initially on Monday or initially on Wednesday, come back to it later on Tuesday, Wednesday, but come back to it later a couple times during the week. That's the idea of how these discussions work. And then you respond to what other people have to say, you build other comments. It's kind of like the way discussions happen on social media platforms, frankly. Okay. I explained the grading of these right over here in terms of how this works out. It can seem a little confusing at first, but I'll give you some feedback on the first week or two about how you're doing for the participation part of it. And if you're not doing enough, I'll let you know. And if you're doing too much, I'll let you know and things like that. Usually people get the hang of it pretty quickly. Okay. Um, you can usually begin these discussions early, but you can't begin them late, and there's no way to make these up. So, in other words, if you miss a discussion, there's no point in coming it back to the next week because I'm not going to count it, right? So, do the discussions when they're due and keep up with it, right? Um, the other thing we'll talk about is some peer review activities that actually will happen a little bit later on. And then I divide participation for the class into two halves. So I'll give you a participation grade for the first part and then a participation grade for the second part. What I do is I average the letter grades that you get for all the participation discussions that we have. Okay. Here are the writing projects. One of the first things we're going to do is talk in detail about these writing projects. So I'm just going to hit a couple details right now. You can look at them. The links are all there. The assignments are all there. It's all everything you need to know. The first project is kind of an unusual one in the sense it's not so much a writing project as it is a learning how to do computer code stuff project. Very little computer code. You'll need to complete a tutorial on a site called Codecademy about HTML and CSS, which is the old school backbone of the web. And you'll also need to complete creating a very simple WordPress website. And WordPress is a content management system that's very, very popular. It probably accounts for about 40% of all the websites that you see online. And honestly, most of the other websites that you see online involve some other content management system. We'll talk more about what the details of that means a little bit later on. That's the first thing we're going to do. The next two assignments, the social media assignment and the website reflection assignment, both kind of happen at the same time. And that's the thing about this class too that I want to emphasize. Writing for the web is something that you can't just sit down and do the night before it's due. You really do have to do some planning out. You really do have to spend some time with it. The analogy I've made before is making a website is kind of like knitting a sweater. It's the kind of thing that it's a lot of repetitive activities, it's a lot of repetitive tasks and things like that. But it takes too long to just sit down the night before and knit a sweater, right? So both of these assignments are kind of spread out. The social media account analysis is going to ask you to follow the social media accounts of some organization, business, or influencer, and probably across several different platforms. Most social media people or activities or organizations focus on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, but usually they involve multiple platforms. And you're going to want to look and see what they do. The books that we're reading talk a lot about the nature of social media writing. So you'll want to make connections between the books that we're reading and the social media, what you're seeing and looking at these different social media accounts. But the point I want to make is that you're going to want to pick out some social media influencer organization, company, whatever's their social media platform, their social media usage. You're going to want to figure out what to follow, and you're going to follow that throughout the semester. Okay. The website for that assignment, what you're going to do is work with some chunk of text that's in the public domain. Could be a short novel, it could be short stories, it could be poems, it could be critical essays, it could be all kinds of different stuff. And the idea is you're going to represent that work and explain that work as a website. Okay. The reason I have you work with a chunk of text from the public domain is I don't want the emphasis here to be on generating a lot of text. Okay. The emphasis here is more on your curating of that text, on your editing of that text, and how you will highlight it and introduce it and things like that. There's going to be a series of steps there. One of the steps towards the end of that will be a mini usability test where you'll ask people, both in class and outside of class, to look at your work. And again, both of these are projects that are going to take several weeks to do. Both of these projects also have reflection essays that are associated with it. So the Codecademy WordPress tutorials, the reflection file is very short, just a couple of pages long. The reflection essays for both the website and the social media analysis are more detailed, and you're definitely going to want to talk more about the story of how you put together these assignments, which are larger assignments, and also make connections to the things that we've read and discussed throughout the semester. Okay. You have to use Google Docs for making these assignments work. And I explain how this works here. This is particularly important in the age of AI, and I'll get to that in a second. But the reason why I want you to use Google Docs from beginning to end is because I want to be able to see what it is that you did in your writing process, both to see what you did if you followed along through actually working through the process as opposed to just trying to sit down and do it all at one sitting, but also to make sure that you're not, borrowing too much from an AI to put that into your writing. Okay. You need to have an AI use statement. So, in other words, if you use AI as part of your writing process, and we'll talk about some of the acceptable uses of AI as we go along this semester, I want you to include an additional document that you'll attach to your reflection essay that explains how you use AI. I used it to come up with ideas for this paragraph or for this concept. I used it to proofread. I used it to get feedback on a draft. I used Grammarly, which is essentially AI, things like that. Okay, so that's if you don't use AI at all, then if you don't do any of those things, then you would have an AI use statement that says I didn't use AI at all. But it's just basically for you to be clear and forthcoming about how you did or did not use that technology. Okay. Have to use MLA style. You don't want to turn stuff in late. That's really important as we get going along here because if you fall behind on making the website, if you fall behind the social media analysis, it's really hard to get caught up. So make sure that you pay attention to those deadlines and things like that. Okay. Here's where I explain grading in terms of the grading scale. This is where I explain the fine print of things. There's a couple things I want to highlight here. One is this question of privacy, because a lot of what you're going to be doing this semester with WordPress and with your other websites that you're going to make with WordPress is it's going to be out and available on the web. Now, I'm never going to refer to, I'm going to make links to all your WordPress sites within the Canvas page, which means that it's going to be essentially behind a, um, a firewall so people can't just stumble across your link. That said, it is possible that somebody could stumble across your work in a way that's a little bit different than it would be if it was just a normal class where you're handing in to me, even digitally, some kind of paper. Okay. This is where I talk about plagiarism, stuff like that. The one thing I'll add here is about AI things. Um, my experience so far with AI in writing classes has been that students in classes like this one, where the students are majors and minors and they take their writing seriously, are not the kinds of students who are just going to hand in an AI paper. And honestly, I don't really know how you would use AI to complete some of these assignments because I just don't see it. AI is potentially very useful to learn more about coding, and we'll talk some about that. And AI can give you some good ideas and things like that. But whether or not you're going to cheat with it, it seems unlikely to me. Having said all that, just to be really clear, if you take a chunk of writing that you get from ChatGPT and just drop it into an essay, I think that's plagiarism, and I will call you out on that, and that could be a problem. If you do use some of the AI features, you want to document this in your AI use statement. Again, we'll talk more about some of these details later on. You have to complete all the assignments in order to pass the course. This is important because every once in a while somebody forgets to hand something in and it doesn't work out for them. And then there's more stuff here about the campus resources, such as the Writing Center, the Academic Project Center, the center, the Disability Resource Center, the LGBT office, all kinds of stuff like that. So there's all kinds of resources there that you can go to learn, to get support for all kinds of different things, both academically and in your life. All right. All right, let me return back to the homepage here for a second. The way I organize my Canvas shells, don't pay a lot of attention to this stuff over here. Okay. This over here. This could be right. It might not be right. Okay, because the way the schedules work. The real schedule to pay attention to is everything that you see right in the middle of the page. Okay. So we are here, right here. This is January 6th. This is the first day of class. This is where the video is located. This is where you're going to introduce yourself to other people in the class. So if I click on that, you'll see that there's this beginning of this discussion. You have to sort of like post a discussion before other people will see it. So this is where you tell us a little bit about yourself and include a picture, that kind of thing. Okay. And then the class, goes on like that. So, for example, here we are talking about the first day of class stuff. Also, by today, the beginning of today, you need to start introducing yourself. January 8th on Wednesday, we're going to read and review the major assignments of the term. So you need to read those things and make sure you understand that. And then we're going to start with the first other reading assignment, which is a little bit of a history of HTML and CSS, like the very beginnings of the web. And then it progresses like that. Okay. So you see all these due dates and all these discussions and things like that as we go. Now, two things about this that I'll point out. Number one is there are probably some additional readings that I will add into this. This is all based on the last time I taught this course, which was fall 23. So it's pretty current, and we're going to stick to this pretty much. But there's been a lot more AI stuff that's come about since then. And so I'll certainly be incorporating some of the readings and things like that about AI issues and other things about writing for the web that have come up in more recent years. I don't know how much we're going to go down. For example, I don't know how much we're going to go down this path or not. But TikTok has become a very hot, controversial issue since the last time I taught this, and the U.S. government may be yet this semester banning TikTok from people being able to use it in the US, and there may be some court cases about this. Well, that's a big social media issue that we'll probably read some about and consider and talk some about. So stuff like that might come up. Um, the way that AI tools have really become useful in for this kinds of activity is that AI is really good actually at coding and at generating images and helping you generate like HTML layouts and WordPress layouts and stuff like that. So we might talk about using some of the tools of AI to help in the process of writing for the web. It's also very useful for writing a lot of social media content, although a lot of the AI writing for social media content is kind of problematic, but we'll get into this. Anyways, it progresses along as we go like this. The first thing that's really do is right here is the Code Academy WordPress tutorials. And you'll notice that we've also spent a fair amount of time looking at these books here. We're going to like read about halfway through the Equine book, for example, by the end of the month. That's about halfway through. And then it progresses on as we go, right? So, for example, on February 10th, we'll talk about parts 1 and 2 of the Anne Handley book and so forth, right? The winter break, other activities as it goes. The social media analysis isn't due until the 14th. The website's not due until is not due. I'm sorry, week 14, April 7th. The website's not due until the very end of the class, right? So in other words, these last two assignments kind of come together at the end in a way that, again, this is why I say that they're very much parallel assignments. They both take time, they both take steps and processes, and so you're gonna have to be kind of working on both of those things as we go throughout the semester. Right. The end of time for the class is April 24th, 2025. That's when everything has to be in. Okay, I think that's it. I hope that my cold didn't bother you too much. It's bothering me, but I'll get over it. Um, this is a good time to ask questions about the class and also a good time to introduce yourself. So be sure to do all kinds of stuff in the discussion part below. And let's get to it. All right, great. Hey, welcome to 444 Online.